You need to remember your place, Vivian." The red tail lights of his Bentley vanished into the storm, leaving me alone on that dark Sonoma road. What he called punishment was, in truth, the final move of my 11-month design. He wanted to teach me a lesson in power. I gave him a masterclass in consequence. The first lesson of that masterclass was stillness. The rain wasn't just cold, it was a baptism, washing away the last 10 years of the woman I was supposed to be. The silence he left behind was louder than any of his insults. He was so proud of his empire, so confident in his numbers. He never once thought to check who was reading his ledgers after he went to sleep. Have you ever felt a moment so cold it burns away every last trace of fear? I closed my eyes. I took a breath. I let the storm remake me. I was no longer his wife. I was his consequence. Then, through the curtain of rain, I saw them. 2 points of light cutting through the darkness, steady and sure. The king had left the board. My first move was arriving. The Jeep's engine was a low growl against the storm, a sound of loyalty in a world of lies. The door opened. My brother Ethan didn't offer a blanket or a kind word. He didn't need to. He's ex-military, a man who communicates in plans, not pity. The warmth of the car was a shock against my soaked skin. I slid into the passenger seat, the smell of leather and rain filling the small space. I didn't shiver. The cold had already settled deep in my bones, a permanent resident. He handed me a tablet, its screen glowing in the dark. No questions. No, "Are you okay?" Just the mission. That's how we've always been. He protects. I plan. Together, we finish what others start. His finger swiped across the screen, past encrypted folders and timelines, landing on a file from last year's winter gala, a guest list. And one name circled in red made the memory rush back in, cold and sharp as broken glass. It wasn't just a party, it was a performance, and I was the star prop. The gallery was buzzing that night. Champagne flutes chimed like tiny bells, a sound I used to love and now associate with the architecture of deceit. I was talking with Eleanor Vance, the toughest art critic in San Francisco, a woman whose opinion could make or break a new artist overnight. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of the old me, the Vivian who was a respected curator, not just Richard's wife. We were discussing a sculpture by a young artist I'd discovered, a piece Richard had initially dismissed as unmarketable. The artist's use of negative space here is a direct commentary on post-industrial isolation, I explained, feeling the passion in my own voice. It's not about what's there, but the profound emptiness the artist forces you to confront. Eleanor was listening, really listening. Her eyes were alight with intellectual curiosity. It was a feeling I had desperately missed, a validation. And that's when Richard appeared. He placed a hand on the small of my back, a gesture that looked like affection to the crowd but was pure, unadulterated ownership. His smile was dazzling, a perfect weapon of social grace. "Vivian, darling," he said, his voice smooth as silk, cutting through my analysis. "Always the romantic. Your heart is a wonderful guide, my love, but perhaps we should leave the financial implications to the experts." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He erased me with a smile. The circle of listeners chuckled politely. Eleanor's face became a mask of professional neutrality. In that single moment, I went from being a peer to being the charming, slightly naive wife. A beautiful object who had opinions, but not expertise. Do you know what it's like to have your identity publicly dismantled by the person who is supposed to be your greatest champion? He turned from me then, his focus shifting entirely to a potential buyer standing nearby, a man named Alcott. The deal was everything. I was merely the prelude. He pulled it from his breast pocket. The Mont Blanc. It wasn't just a pen. It was a scepter, the instrument of his power. I watched him uncap it. I heard the soft, expensive click. I saw the flash of platinum on the clip under the gallery lights as he handed it to Alcott to sign the purchase agreement for another piece. He didn't just sell art. He sold a narrative, a world of effortless success and impeccable taste. And that pen was his seal, his authenticator. Every document that built his fraudulent empire, every contract that bound another person to his will, was signed with that exact instrument. He was meticulous about it. It was his tell. The memory faded, leaving a familiar, bitter taste. In the Jeep, the only sound was the rain and my own steady breathing. My reflection stared back at me from the dark screen of the tablet. The woman in the glass looked different now. The softness was gone. The romantic had died in that gallery. What was left was a strategist. Ethan pointed to a signature on a digital document he pulled up. The same arrogant flourish. He signed everything with that pen. It was his symbol of power. It would soon be his undoing. The rain hammered on the roof of the Jeep, a frantic drumbeat to the silent tension inside. Ethan didn't speak. He just navigated through secure folders on the tablet, his face illuminated by the cold blue light of encrypted data. This was his world. Certainty. Precision. No room for error. He swiped to a new screen, a wire transfer interface, pre-filled and waiting. A ghost account I had set up 14 months ago, using a loophole in a prenuptial clause Richard himself had drafted. He was so proud of his foresight. He never imagined I could have foresight of my own. My finger hovered over the final confirmation button. "The timing is critical, Viv," Ethan said, his voice a low rumble, never taking his eyes off the road. "You hesitate. The window closes." He could get spooked. I wasn't hesitating. I was remembering. I was forcing myself back to the moment just minutes before, to the side of that desolate road, the trigger for this entire operation. I needed to feel it one last time. The lash of the wind whipping my thin dress against my skin, the taste of rain and betrayal on my lips, the profound, crushing silence after the engine of his Bentley faded into the night. He wanted me to feel like nothing more than a ghost, an irrelevant footnote in the grand story of Richard Hale. He expected tears. He expected a desperate phone call. He expected me to break. Have you ever been so thoroughly written off that it becomes your greatest strength? Because in that supposed emptiness, I wasn't thinking about forgiveness. I was counting the seconds, calculating the distance, recalibrating the final stages of the plan that his arrogance had just green-lit. He thought he was stranding me in the middle of nowhere. In reality, he had just delivered me to the designated starting line of his own demise. He was so blinded by his own brilliance, so convinced of my weakness that he never saw the board on which we were both players. He thought he was the king. He was just a pawn, about to be sacrificed. My finger came down on the screen. Firm. Final. The screen flashed. Transfer initiated. Then, seconds later, a quiet confirmation that felt like a tectonic shift in my universe. Secure transfer of $150,000 complete. 10 times. 10 times the amount he had used as an excuse to throw me away. The money itself wasn't the point. Not really. It was the message. It was the first tile to fall in the grand, chaotic mosaic of his destruction. I saw Ethan give a single sharp nod in the reflection of the dark window. The transfer wasn't just money, it was munitions. It was the first deposit for the legal war to come, paid to the most ruthless divorce attorney in San Francisco. Richard was probably pouring himself a second glass of scotch right now, basking in the glow of the lesson he thought he'd taught me about my place. He was celebrating his victory, so sure of his absolute power. He thought he left me with nothing. He was wrong. I had just funded the army that would bring him to his knees. An army needs soldiers. Mine had been recruited in secret, months before the first shot was ever fired. With a retainer now paid, my army was officially at war. Ethan swiped the tablet screen, and the first dossier appeared, its crisp, professional layout, a stark contrast to the chaos of the storm outside. This was my war room. This was my declaration. The first face was his own, Ethan Cross, my brother. The world saw him as a quiet security consultant who specialized in protecting private art collections, a respectable, boring profession. But I knew what his file didn't say. I knew about the years he spent in private military contracting, the kind of work that doesn't end up on a resume. He was a ghost, trained to see vulnerabilities others missed. He didn't just build my panic room, he built my fortress. He swept my home. He secured my communications. He vanished into the background of my life, becoming my shadow. The hidden cameras in Richard's gallery, the ones disguised as smoke detectors and temperature sensors, that was Ethan's work. He was my guardian, the unwavering wall between me and Richard's temper. He was the first person I called. He was the only one I knew I could trust with my life. He swiped again. A new face appeared, a woman with eyes as sharp as her tailored suit, Lena Patel, the most feared art and asset litigation attorney in San Francisco. Richard knew of her, of course. He'd called her a vulture at a cocktail party once, laughing about how she dismantled the fortunes of his rivals. He never imagined that vulture would one day be circling him, paid for by a ghost account he didn't know existed. Lena's specialty wasn't just divorce. It was deconstruction. She could read a prenuptial agreement like a battle map, finding the one hairline fracture in the defenses and driving a wedge through it until the whole structure collapsed. She was the one who found the loophole. She was the blade I would use to sever his empire from its foundations. The final face was the most unassuming and by far the most dangerous, Dr. Simon Brooks. A semi-retired forensic accountant with a gentle grandfatherly smile and a mind like a supercomputer. Simon had spent 2 decades as a consultant for the FBI's white-collar crime division. He was the man they called when money disappeared into the labyrinth of offshore accounts and shell corporations. He was a ghost of a different kind, one who could follow the faintest scent of digital deception across continents. And what Simon found was the secret that elevated this from a bitter divorce to a federal case. Richard wasn't just hiding money from me. He was running a sophisticated money laundering operation for a very select, very dangerous group of international clients, using overpriced authenticated art as the vehicle. The gallery wasn't just his passion, it was his washing machine. Have you ever seen a problem so complex, so overwhelming, that finally seeing it mapped out feels like a superpower? Ethan swiped to the final screen. It was a web, a dark constellation of deceit, with Richard's name at the center. Lines and arrows connected shell corporations in the Cayman Islands to anonymous bank accounts in Switzerland, all linked back to inflated art appraisals from his gallery. Every lie, every transaction, every betrayal, visualized in one terrifying, beautiful diagram. All of his escape routes were cut off. Every safe harbor was mined. He was trapped in a prison of his own making, and he didn't even know the walls were there. At the top of the screen was the name of our 11-month operation, our guiding principle, Project Phoenix. For 11 months we watched, we listened. We waited for his last mistake. For 3 weeks there was a calculated silence. Richard's lawyers sent polite, condescending letters. He sent a single bouquet of white lilies to the house, the kind you send to a funeral, with a note that simply read, "Thinking of you." It wasn't an apology. It was a threat, a reminder of who he thought was in control. He was giving me time to feel the isolation, to feel the financial pressure of our joint accounts being frozen, expecting me to crumble and come crawling back, begging for his forgiveness. He didn't know that our war room wasn't in the house he thought I was trapped in. It was a sterile, high-tech apartment with a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the San Francisco Bay, a place that didn't exist in his world. The trigger came not as a storm, but as a clinical, precise phone call. Lena Patel's voice cut through the speakerphone, sharp as a scalpel. The accounts are frozen solid. He tried to move $2 million to Zurich an hour ago. The bank flagged it, and his lawyers are screaming bloody murder just as we planned," she said, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. "He's trapped, Vivian." Now we watch to see what kind of animal he becomes when he's caged. Ethan, without a word, tapped a few keys on his laptop. One of the main screens on the wall flickered to life. Live feed. Richard's office. The hidden camera we installed during the security upgrade gave us a perfect high-definition view of his curated world beginning to unravel. The mask was gone. The curated perfection had cracked. His $100 silk tie was loosened. His hair was a mess. He paced his office like a caged panther, a predator who suddenly realizes the jungle has shrunk to the size of a box. He was yelling into his phone, his face a mask of crimson fury, spitting words like incompetence and lawsuit. This was the real Richard Hale, not the charming philanthropist, not the brilliant art mogul. This was a cornered bully, stripped of his power and thrashing in a panic. Have you ever seen someone's true self emerge only when they're losing? He wasn't just a thief. He was a predator. He ended his call, slamming the phone down with a force that rattled a small sculpture on his desk. He took a deep breath. He smoothed his tie. He ran a hand through his hair. The predator was putting its mask back on, composing itself for a different kind of attack. If he couldn't move his assets, he would destroy mine, my reputation, my credibility. He buzzed his intercom, his voice suddenly calm, almost gentle. "Camille, could you come in here for a moment, please?" Camille, his young assistant. 24 years old, bright, ambitious, and utterly terrified of him. I knew because I had been her once. Ethan pulled up her file. Student loans, a sick mother. She was trapped in her own way. Richard knew this. He preyed on it. She entered, a folder clutched to her chest like a shield. "Yes, Mr. Hale?" Richard's voice was now a warm, concerned whisper, the voice he used when he was about to move in for the kill. "Camille," he began, gesturing for her to sit, "I've discovered something terrible. It seems Vivian, in her distress. She's been moving funds without my knowledge for some time, falsifying acquisition records." He let the lie hang in the air. Camille's eyes widened. "I need your help to protect the gallery," he continued, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "There's a document here, an acquisition form for the sterling sculpture. The date. It seems to be incorrect, an oversight during a very chaotic time." He slid a single piece of paper across his vast mahogany desk. It was an invoice, and next to it, he placed his scepter, the Mont Blanc pen. "I just need you to witness and sign this corrected version. The date needs to be last month to accurately reflect when the funds were allocated, before all this unpleasantness." It was a masterclass in manipulation. He was asking her to commit a felony, disguised as a simple clerical correction to save the company she depended on. He was making her an accomplice. He was creating a false document to paint me as a thief, the perfect way to discredit me before our case ever saw a judge. In our war room 20 miles away, I didn't smile. I didn't even breathe. I just watched the screen. This was the moment. The checkmate I had anticipated for months. He hadn't just committed fraud for his own gain. He had now actively conspired to frame me. He had crossed the final line, driven by pure, malicious intent. I watched Camille's trembling hand reach for the pen, and just like that, he handed me the weapon that would bury him. The federal courtroom was cold, impersonal. The polished wood and marble were designed to absorb emotion, to render everything down to the hard, unyielding surface of the law. Richard sat at the defendant's table, looking every bit the part of the persecuted mogul. His suit was impeccable. His posture was confident. He even managed a tight, reassuring smile for a journalist sketching him from the gallery. He believed this was just another negotiation, another performance he could control. He believed he was still the king in his castle. He had no idea the walls were about to come down. The judge's gavel came down with a crack that echoed in the sudden, heavy silence. Lena Patel stood, her movements precise, her voice calm and clear. "Your Honor," she began, "we would like to present evidence of the defendant's state of mind and pattern of behavior following the freezing of his assets." The first piece of evidence wasn't a document. It was a sound. Richard's voice, captured by our surveillance, filled the courtroom. It was raw, furious, stripped of its usual charm. The audio was of him on the phone with his Swiss banker, spitting venom and threats, demanding access to the $2 million. I saw his lawyer wince. I saw the first flicker of doubt in the juror's eyes. The king's carefully polished crown had just slipped, but he still wasn't broken. He whispered to his lawyer, his expression one of annoyed impatience. This was a private matter, a marital spat, inconvenient but not fatal. "And now, Your Honor," Lena announced, "the prosecution calls Camille Dubois to the stand." The heavy courtroom doors opened. Camille walked in, her steps small but steady. She looked different. The nervous energy was gone, replaced by a quiet, fragile resolve. She didn't look at Richard, not even once, though I could feel the force of his gaze trying to burn a hole through her. He looked at her. Panic flared. He was losing. Her testimony was devastating. In a voice that trembled but never broke, she recounted the conversation in his office. She described the pressure, the manipulation, the way he'd framed the act of forgery as a heroic gesture to save the gallery. When Lena asked her what he had her sign, she gave the details of the backdated invoice, the one designed to paint me as a thief. Richard's lawyer objected. "Hearsay, speculation. This is the word of a disgruntled employee against a respected businessman." "Is it?" Lena asked calmly. "Your Honor, we present Exhibit G, the document in question." The forged invoice appeared on the monitors around the room, and we call our final expert witness to the stand, Dr. Simon Brooks. Simon took the stand, looking more like a university professor than the man who had dismantled Richard's empire. He spoke about financial forensics, about the digital breadcrumbs that fraud always leaves behind. Then Lena directed him to the signature on the screen. "Dr. Brooks, can you tell the court about the signature on this document?" "I can," Simon said, his voice gentle. "Through spectrographic analysis, we identified the ink. It's a specific custom-blended shade of blue, quite rare." He paused. "It is a perfect match to the ink found in the defendant's personal fountain pen, the Mont Blanc he used to sign every other document we've analyzed." The foreshadowed detail, his beloved pen, was now in the spotlight. "Furthermore," Simon continued, as a magnified image of the signature appeared on screen, "the pressure analysis of the nib strokes shows a hesitation and an unnatural angle inconsistent with a routine signature, but highly consistent with someone attempting to replicate another person's handwriting under duress." The room was silent. The pen, his symbol of absolute power, of control, of his signature being law, had just become the scientific proof of his crime. It had become his confession. Have you ever witnessed the exact moment a bully realizes the game is over? I looked at Richard, really looked at him. The confidence had evaporated. The anger was gone. All that was left was a hollowed-out shell of a man, his eyes wide with the terrifying understanding that he had been outplayed at every turn. In that moment, I didn't feel hatred. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, echoing emptiness. He hadn't just been a monster to me. He had been a monster to everyone, and his own appetites had finally consumed him. He was the architect of his own destruction. Just then, 2 federal agents entered the courtroom and stood by the door. The judge looked down at Richard, her face grim. The verdict was a formality. His fate was already sealed. I watched them approach his table. I heard the click of the handcuffs. The flashbulbs from the press erupted, a silent, blinding storm. The king of the art world had fallen. His frame was broken. It's been a year since the verdict. A year since the storm of flashbulbs and headlines faded, leaving behind the quiet, steady work of rebuilding. The name on the polished brass plaque by the door isn't Hale. It was never really mine. The name is Cross, the Renewal Foundation, my name, my second act. The air inside this space is different from Richard's gallery. It doesn't smell like cold money and intimidation. It smells like wet paint and turpentine and the chaotic, beautiful scent of possibility. The walls are white, the light is bright, and the art is loud, defiant, and unapologetically alive. Our mission is simple. We find artists who are being silenced, and we give them a megaphone. This painter here, a young woman named Sarah from Oakland, was told her work was too aggressive for the market. Her former agent tried to bury her career. We gave her a solo exhibition and a legal team. Her collection sold out in a single night. This sculptor over here, Leo, had his designs stolen by a famous mentor. He was told he'd be blacklisted forever if he spoke up. We didn't just help him sue. We funded his next project and connected him with a foundry that believed in him. We don't just write checks. We fight back. Lena and Simon are on my board of directors now. The army that brought down an empire has been repurposed. It is now a shield for the vulnerable. I got a letter from Richard last week. 4 pages of the same perfect, elegant handwriting, written with what I can only assume is a standard-issue prison pen. It wasn't an apology. It was a manifesto of blame. A carefully constructed narrative in which he was the visionary, the victim, and I was the vindictive destroyer of his beautiful world. He still doesn't understand that he was the architect of his own ruin, that his greed was the spark and his cruelty was the gasoline. I read it. I folded it. I placed it in a desk drawer filled with old, irrelevant documents. It held no power over me. None. Have you ever looked back at a monster from your past and realized it's become small, distant, and utterly powerless? That is a unique kind of peace. The rage is gone. The need for vengeance is gone. They have been replaced by a quiet, fierce sense of purpose. Tonight is our foundation's first major showcase. The gallery is filled with the same kind of influential people Richard used to court: critics, collectors, patrons. But I'm not the host, nervously trying to remember my place. I'm not a prop. I'm just a spectator, standing near the back, watching it all unfold. And then I see it. A moment that feels like a perfect closing circle. A brilliant young sculptor named Maya, one of our first grantees, is holding court with a famous critic from the Chronicle. I watch her speak about her work, her hands moving with passion, her voice clear and strong. She is fierce and brilliant, and she is being heard. The critic is listening, captivated. Maya is not asking for permission. She is commanding respect. And in her, I see the woman I was, the curator Richard tried so hard to erase. But she is stronger, bolder. And I feel a genuine smile spread across my face, the first truly light one in years. Richard tried to put me in a frame, a beautiful, silent object to be admired and owned. He thought my place was to be seen and not heard. But a frame can be broken, a canvas can be repainted, and a story can be rewritten. He forgot that you can't be erased when you're the one holding the pen. Thank you so much for holding space for this story with me. If stories like these resonate with you, I hope you'll consider subscribing, and I would be truly honored to read about your own family's journey in the comments below.